That was Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent earlier on Squawk Box. It's no secret that President Trump is frustrated with Fed Chair Jay Powell over interest rates. That was the secretary talking a little bit about what he would see happening in this scenario. Of course, he's been mentioned as a potential Fed chair replacement. For more on this, we want to bring in Ken Rogoff. He's professor of economics at Harvard University. He's also the author of Our Dollar, Your Problem, an insider's view of 7 turbulent decades of global finance and the road ahead. And Ken, first of all, welcome. It's really great to see you here. You are a chess master, and you've spent some time gaming out this idea of a shadow Fed chairman. You're not a huge fan of it. What are the problems in the setup as you see it?
Well, I don't think having a shadow Fed chair who's going to be Fed chair is going to influence the Fed all that much. I think what Secretary Bessent said about a bit of forward guidance on what the chair might do, that's correct. But also, the shadow Fed chair is having to say at every moment what they would do. And if it's not in line with what Trump would do, then he can unnominate him. And so in a way, it paints the shadow Fed chair into a corner. Trump, I think, has said he wants the rate to brought down to 1%. I don't really see how that's consistent with the growth he foresees without having a lot of inflation in this economy. So it's very clever in a way. He's going to appoint the Fed chair. He won't control them. He's seen that with the Supreme Court justices, and he's trying to paint them into a corner. But I don't know that if he's wrong about the interest rates, that they really need to stay somewhat higher, that's going to prove a good thing for the economy or for President Trump.
You thought up an interesting scenario that had not occurred to me, and that's what could happen potentially if there is a shadow Fed chair from within the Fed, and that being Jay Powell. If he doesn't step down, he may not be chairman, but if he doesn't give up his seat, what happens?
No, that is such a good point.
That's your point.
If Powell doesn't give up his seat, if Powell doesn't give up his seat and stays on the board, and Trump appoints someone who the rest of the board doesn't respect, I think if they respect them, they'll give them a lot of rope. They'll go along with them. But if they don't respect them, Powell will be the shadow chair from within the Fed, and the Fed chair may not control the board. Again, just a few minutes earlier, Secretary Bessent acknowledged that it's not all the Fed chair. You have to persuade the entire Open Market Committee.
All right, you've got a book that's out talking about, Our Dollar, Your Problem. And we did bring this up with Treasury Secretary as well, just the idea of the pressure the dollar has been under this year. You think that weakness will continue. Why?
Well, Trump inherited a very high dollar. And I'm looking at given cost of living, other measures of how expensive it is in a country. We haven't seen the dollar this high since 2002, 1985. And both times the dollar, not overnight, but over a couple of years, came down very far, I think 40% by some measures after 2002. So sure, it's down 10%. But it's still very high. I mean, ask somebody in Japan where they've had no inflation compared to us, and yet the yen has fallen a lot, how expensive it is in the States. And I think if you look around the world, that's still the case. So sure, Trump's actions have probably accelerated, a move that might have happened anyway, but the dollar is still high. So even if Harris were president, I think it would be coming down.